Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the Comox Valley Regional District regular board meeting of Tuesday, October 26th to order. I'd like to recognize that we're on the traditional unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, and today we're going to read Article 42 of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The United Nations, its bodies, including the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues and specialized agencies, including at the country level, and states shall promote respect for and full application of the provisions of the Declaration and follow up the effectiveness of this declaration. And with that, I'm just going to pass it quickly to our CIO to introduce someone.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors, for me taking this moment. I just wish to introduce to you Caitlin Powell, who's in the audience, and if you could give a wave. Caitlin has joined our financial team as the Manager of Finance, reporting to the Chief Financial Officer. Caitlin's first day was yesterday. And Caitlin comes to us from the BC Investment Management Corporation, which is headquartered in Victoria, but Caitlin has been a resident of the Comox Valley, and we're very grateful for her to show an interest in coming and working with us. So welcome to Caitlin.
Welcome. All right, and so with that, we move to item B, which is the in-camera meeting. We're going to be moving in camera following the end of the regular meeting. Thank you, Hillian and McCullen, and we'll be moving according to 91C of the Community Charter. Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that is carried. And we're on to adoption of minutes, adoption of the regular board minutes from September 28th. McCullum and Hamir, thank you. Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And then we have minutes from October 5th. Hamir and Morin, anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And we are on to reports. We have the Black Creek Oyster Bay Service Committee minutes from September 20th.
Move receipt.
Director Lee.
Of September 20th and October 18th minutes.
Both the minutes. Thank you.
Yes, please.
And Director Hillian second. Any further discussion? And anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that is carried. And we're on to recommendation number 1.
Move recommendation number 1.
Second.
Director Lee and Director Grieve. Any further discussion? Okay, and it's a vote of areas C and D. All in favor? Director Lee?
No, anyone opposed? Nobody.
No one opposed. That's carried unanimously. And on to recommendation 2.
Second.
That's Grant and Lee. Thank you. We can really hear you, Director Lee. It's great. And so this is regarding the financial plan. Any further discussion? Okay, anyone opposed? Again, it's a vote of the 2 areas. And that's carried unanimously. On to recommendation 3. Grant and Grieve, thank you. And this is regarding bylaw number 5. And again, it's a vote of area C and D. Any further discussion? And anyone opposed? Oh, Director Grieve, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I thought it might be interesting to give a little bit of background for the board and our viewing audience out there. As you probably know, at the Black Creek Oyster Bay Water Service, we recently drilled a 3rd well. And we took the best information we had at the time and located the well within the nature park in area D, which of course is regional district property because it's a park, but it's also part of the water system, so that the Comox Valley and area D of the Strathcona both have some interest there. But unfortunately, in the summer, we found that the 3rd well was producing about 1/3 less than we had expected. And as a result, just to err on the side of caution, it was decided that we will not be entertaining any new connections or increased connections at this time. That does not mean, however, that any in-stream developments aren't going ahead. They are. But I think it's only wise for us to, as I say, in abundance of caution, to pull back the reins right now a little bit. And I know it's causing a lot of consternation in our areas there, but I do say that this is also an opportunity for us to maybe drill in a little different area of the aquifer, because of course these wells are in very close proximity. And it's much like a glass with 3 straws going into it. You can only take so much water out. So I think this in some regards is probably going to prove to be a blessing if we can source water in the aquifer, possibly farther north. So that's it in a nutshell, and that's why we're going there. So I think in the end of the day, at the end of the day, as I say, I think it's going to probably prove to be a positive thing. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that background information, Director Grieve. Any further comments? Okay, anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried unanimously. And for Director Lee's benefit, I would like to ask the board if we can vary the agenda to bring forward bylaw number 682 for Black Creek Oyster Bay. Grant and Hillian, anyone opposed to varying the agenda? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. So we'll bring forward bylaw 682. Director Grieve.
Second.
Director Lee, thank you. And is there any further comments on the bylaw?
I just have a question through the chair to our CAO. Does the definition of non-domestic use of water preclude anything like commercial water bottling or bulk water sales? And should we be considering adding this to the definition?
Thank you very much for the question. And I'll just refer to Mark Rutten, General Manager of Engineering Services, to respond to the question.
He's just walking to the mic, Director Lee.
Yeah, thank you through the CAO and through the chair. So I'm just reading the definition now that's in the bylaw. And unfortunately, I don't know for sure if it does preclude that use of water. I'd have to look into it a little bit further. Right now it says means the use of water for a purpose that is not defined as a domestic purpose.
And the domestic purpose is means the use of water for human consumption, food preparation, sanitation, and other household purposes. Okay, but that wouldn't preclude industrial scale use of the water for producing food or producing, would it? Or unless it's strictly one house, one household that you're referring to there. I just want to nail that down because, you know, we could have some issues with the use of Black Creek Oyster Bay water for purposes other than we expect that might take away some of the water that we have available now.
And Madam Chair, I just Jake Martins, our General Manager of Corporate Services, has indicated that he has something to add to help answer this question. So I'll refer that to him.
Okay.
Thanks, Russell, through the chair. Yeah, as it's just been noted, it does specify for household purposes, which would not be inclusive of commercial or industrial use. The other factor here, of course, is that it would also be regulated as a land use, which would also be another requirement as part of that process. So in my opinion, the domestic purpose definition does not include that commercial or industrial use of it.
Okay. All right, I'll have to trust the Comox Valley Planning to do the right things then, because I don't vote on their land use plans and it does affect our water system. But having heard that, thank you, Jake, and I'll move first and second reading of bylaw 682, being Black Creek Oyster Bay Water Service Regulation Fees and Charges bylaw 2008, amendment number 10, for first and second concurrently.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, okay, it's moved and seconded, okay, thanks, Edwin.
And so, oh, Edwin, would you like to speak to it?
No. You can second it, Brenda.
I did, I think I did, but I'm not sure if people are hearing me or not.
Yeah. It's-
Is
it's
it
been
too,
first
is it
and
too
seconded.
loud?
You're doing
Am I
great.
too loud?
You're doing great.
Here, I'll put down the volume.
Okay, so again, it's a vote of areas C and D. It's been first and seconded. All in favor, or anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. We're on to third.
Second,
Director Grant and Director Lee, thank you. And anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that is carried. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Director Lee.
thank you, have a good meeting. See you
too.
later.
Okay, so we'll go back. Where did we get to here? UBID? Yeah, okay, thank you. Item 2, the 2021 UBID financial statement and auditors report. Grant and Moran, thank you. And I'll pass it to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors, and I'll refer to the Acting Chief Financial Officer, Kevin DeVell, who will introduce the report, as well as Graham Roberts from MNP.
Thank you very much, Russell. Good afternoon through the chair to the directors. So what we're presenting to you today is the last financial statement for the now former Union Bay Improvement District. So as you'll recall, effective July 1st, the Union Bay Improvement District was converted over to Regional District Services. So what's in front of you today will just kind of help us wrap up kind of the financial aspects of that organization for the remaining 6-month period up to June 30th, 2021. So with that, Graham Roberts from MNP is on the Zoom call and will be presenting you with an overview of the financial statements and the audit findings. And then we'll certainly be available and happy to answer any questions. So over to Graham.
Good evening. So just, yeah, as highlighted there, this is the last statements of Union Bay Improvement District. So it's the 6 months period. So due to when the was resolved, or when it was rescinded the Lettings patent. So just a couple things to note when that happens, which is in the audit filing. I'm just going to hit a couple of high level items. These statements are still prepared in a going concern manner. That means that we haven't had to fair value all the assets and liabilities of Union Bay Improvement District because the regional district is taking on the operations on a continuous basis on July 1st. So these are still prepared on a going concern basis. So regular accounting processes for that. That's basically all I wanted to talk about that on the going concern piece. It's also noted in our emphasis of matter in the audit report. So it's a clean audit report. So the financial statements are materially correct, for the statements of operations and statement of financial positions. But we do have the emphasis of matter, which again states that these are the final statements of the Union Bay Improvement District. Some highlights just to bring to the board's attention. So again, these comparative numbers, so statement of financial positions, so these are the June 30th numbers is the current period, but the comparative period is from December of 2020. Some work was done to try and clean things up before the year end, but there's still some payables that were outstanding at year end. And part of the financial statements, we also accrued a $100,000 liability for decommissioning the old water treatment plant. And that was part of the land use agreement when that process started. So we've accrued that there. That's disclosed a little more fully in note 14 to the financial statements. You see deferred revenues up a fair bit from prior years. That's because the province gave Union Bay the full annual amount for fire protection and street lighting. So most of the increase there is related to that. And of course, there is a debt that's been slowly paid down a little bit in the current year. So your financial assets less your financial liabilities results in a net debt of $994,526. So non-financial assets, no real change there. There was some cleanup done again as part of the conversion process where the asset listing was reviewed, and you'll see in the statement of operations that there is some losses when those assets were brought over. And that was just cleaning up old stuff to make sure it's a little cleaner on conversion. So total community surplus is down from prior years. It's at $7.8 million. I'll go through that briefly in a sec. Now jump to the statement of operations. Again, the middle column is the actual results. The first column on the left is the budget amount. That's again the full year amount. The middle column is the actual results, and the comparative column is a 12-year or 12 months amount, full year amount. So you'll notice most of the revenue is down half. Water tools is actually not down half, it's only down 35%. And that's because water tools were increased almost 20% for the 2021 year. And as noted, there was some loss and disposal of tangible capital assets. That was just really writing off some non-used equipment or stuff that is no longer in place. That's just part of cleaning up on conversion. So total revenue is just under 700,000. On the expense side, so again, everything is down from prior years and budget. Again, it's just because of half a year, except for repairs and maintenance. So that's almost $153,000. That's where we put that $100,000 charge for the remedial work done on the old water treatment plant site. So that's the only real change there. So total operating deficit in the current year or current 6 months was 174,000. So is there any questions on the statement of operations or statement of financial position?
I don't see any.
Okay, I'm just going to quickly hit note 10 as well. So this sort of shows the accumulated surplus of where the funds are. So the operating fund, which is the fire and water, is actually in a deficit of just over $300,000. And there's some reserves, statutory reserves set up there of $2,660,000 in your statutory reserves, and non-statutory reserves are 129,000. So your investments in your capital assets, combined water and fire, is 5.3. So then that's how you have your 7.8 accumulated surplus. So again, the biggest piece of that is your investment in your physical infrastructure, and then sort of the cash reserves is your non-statutory and statutory reserves. So that's a very quick overview of the statements for Union Bay.
Great, thank you so much. And I'll just ask again if there's any questions. Nope, I don't see any. You did a good job of presenting. So anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried, and there's a recommendation. Cole Hamilton and Grieve, thank you. And the recommendation is that the financial statements for Union Bay Improvement District for the 6-month period ending June 30th be approved. Any further discussion? And it's a vote of the full board. All in favor? Anyone opposed? And that's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Okay, and we're on to Indigenous Relations, item 3. Grant and Hamir, thank you. And I will pass it over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors, and James Warren, Deputy CAO, is here to present this report and introduce the consultants that are assisting in the work.
Thank you. Thanks.
Live.
Thanks, Russell, and good afternoon, directors. I'm very pleased to introduce this report today. As you are all familiar, the CVRD works with an Indigenous Relations Framework and a Statement of Reconciliation. The Board of Directors has determined these documents as foundational for working with Indigenous nations, and that has been instrumental in setting our corporate direction. The CVRD enjoys a very strong relationship with Comox First Nation in particular, and that is evidenced through monthly leadership meetings and several agreements on major initiatives, including for our water and sewer services. Further, you have set Indigenous relations as one of your 4 strategic drivers, allowing staff to apply that lens to the work that we do. More recently, events across the country have illustrated how important it is to work with Indigenous nations and recognize our shared histories. Now more than ever, the discovery of children's graves in Kamloops earlier this year has underscored the tragic history of residential schools in Canada and reinforces why reconciliation is so critical for society to take steps forward together. In early 2021, the CVRD set a goal to develop an action plan for improving Indigenous relations. The CVRD has since hired Dillon Consulting Limited to undertake an awareness assessment and develop mid and longer term actions to advance reconciliation. In a minute, I will introduce Caroline Robel from Dillon Consulting to present the work that has been undertaken to date. Before that, though, I want to take a moment and reinforce how the work of reconciliation is about, in part, relationships and how it is incumbent upon us as the CVRD to take the time that is necessary to build those relationships, to build the trust, and to take actions that are meaningful and helpful. The work that you are doing as the board through this reconciliation assessment is critical to help lay the foundations for a more positive relationship with Indigenous nations and peoples in the future. This assessment and its findings, as well as some of the actions that will arise from this work, will help to build better knowledge of all Indigenous peoples in the Comox Valley. While there may be a desire to move more quickly and see more immediate and tangible outcomes, we need to remember that developing a relationship takes time, as does investing in each other to build trust. To do this, we must build a strong foundation through the investment of time, resources, and training for our staff that will help us to move forward in a way that is meaningful. And that is where Dillon's work comes in, and Caroline's presentation will focus on the work undertaken to date and highlight some of the themes that they are pursuing, and that will form the assessment report that we're expecting towards the end of the year. So with that, I'll pass the microphone over to Caroline.
Thank you, James. I hope everybody can hear me okay. And perfect. And I'm just going to be sharing my screen. We've got a presentation just to guide this portion, so bear with me one moment. Is that okay that I do that? It will stop whoever's screen sharing at the moment from doing that.
Yep, we've given you permission to
Perfect.
post. Yeah.
Okay. And is everybody able to see the slide?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Wonderful. So thank you very much for this opportunity to present today to the board. We're excited to share what we've done to date and next steps on the CVRD's Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation Assessment Project. So the aim of the project is to identify potential midterm and long-term strategies and actions that can support the implementation of the CVRD's Indigenous Relations Framework. In terms of what has been done to date, we started off with background research and review. after a project kickoff meeting, I should say. And this was helping us to develop an understanding of the CVRD's approaches and actions to date in terms of Indigenous relations and reconciliation, and to explore and identify actions and best practices employed by other local governments that may lend support to this assessment. The project was introduced to Comox First Nation at the September Chief and Council meeting. A survey has been prepared for CVRD staff to better understand the level of awareness among staff in terms of reconciliation and the level of interest in learning. And these findings will help to inform recommendations in the assessment report. A focus group with the CVRD executive team and senior managers was held to dive a little deeper into the level of awareness and interest, as well as potential opportunities and constraints to increasing learning and awareness at the CVRD. And based on these efforts, the Dillon team has identified some important themes and considerations to set the stage for potential mid and long-term strategies and actions in support of reconciliation. And these will be included in the forthcoming assessment report. So in terms of some of the key themes and considerations we identified through the CVRD engagement to date, the CVRD leadership team seemingly has a good level of awareness and understanding of Indigenous issues, relations, and the benefits of these, as well as reconciliation. And this provides a strong foundation for building awareness throughout the organization. The CVRD is, The CVRD is keen in pursuing opportunities that support reconciliation through the provision of services and the development of other initiatives. Learning and awareness building throughout the organization in terms of Indigenous peoples is important for reconciliation, and outreach and education to build this at the CVRD is clearly a priority. There can be legislative and capacity constraints to Indigenous relationship building and reconciliation, and these require ongoing commitment to identify opportunities and solutions to overcome these and to adapt over time. Reconciliation is an ongoing commitment, and reconciliation planning undertaken by the CVRD should be adaptable and evolving based on the relationships, needs, and opportunities, and the constraints on both part of both the CVRD and Indigenous communities and groups. And reciprocal relationships between Indigenous communities and groups in the CVRD require sufficient time to establish and ongoing meaningful actions, to grow. And when we look to the literature, what we can learn from other local governments or what's been done, and we looked through both BC, other provinces, and abroad. One of the key themes is that acknowledging and understanding the past and work done in the area of reconciliation through the TRC's calls to action and UNDRIP, it's foundational to understanding and exploring potential actions that support reconciliation. Any training that is offered should be dynamic and facilitated through a variety of perspectives, experiences, and worldviews, including those of local Indigenous communities and groups. This supports a strong foundation of awareness and understanding amongst staff in an organization. Approaching the relationship with Indigenous communities at the government-to-government level can enable the inclusion of Indigenous needs and perspectives in the provision of services and local government initiatives. Working collaboratively with Indigenous communities and groups to identify and address common issues can enable collective action to meeting respective community needs and achieving mutual benefits. And it also broadens the capacity on both sides to do so. An incremental approach to collaboration based upon common interests, aspirations, and respective capacities enables continuous learning and relationship building between local governments and Indigenous communities and groups. Engagement and collaboration timelines established by local governments should be flexible and adaptable wherever possible to enable engagement and collaboration that is culturally appropriate and respectful and respects the capacity limitations. Recognizing capacity constraints for both local governments and Indigenous communities and groups, and allowing sufficient time for the progression of these relationships as both interest and capacity allows is essential to success. Working in collaboration with Indigenous communities and groups when developing policy can support a strong foundation for reciprocal government-to-government relations. Recognizing reconciliation documents as mere stepping stones to some of the very important conversations that need to take place and the evolving relationship, it's important for a holistic approach that can be sustained over time. And lastly, building relationships at the local government level can support and/or initiate change at the provincial and federal levels. And this is important because some of the constraints to local government might be based on might be legislative in nature. So we've identified some preliminary recommendations and foundational strategies in support of reconciliation, and that support all three of the action areas identified by the CBRD in the Indigenous Relationships Framework. These are to develop policy, strengthen relationships, and to support learning. So we recommend that the Reconciliation Assessment Report is used to engage Indigenous communities and groups on the CBRD's path to reconciliation. So the forthcoming report should be considered preliminary in nature, and it can serve as an important starting point for discussions about reconciliation and their perspectives on it. Discussions should include if and how Indigenous communities and groups want to be engaged by the CBRD moving forward with respect to reconciliation planning and implementation, and this can guide future efforts. We also recommend the CBRD considers establishing a reconciliation working group or advisory committee. While it's important for the CBRD to take on the initial planning work for reconciliation, it's equally important to include Indigenous communities and groups and their perspectives in decision-making processes related to reconciliation moving forward. We recommend that the Reconciliation Working Group or Advisory Committee, with representation from the CBRD and Indigenous communities and groups, is established, assuming there is support from all sides. And the group or committee can serve to provide input and advice on issues relating to reconciliation and matters that may impact Indigenous people in the community. And it can signal a long-term commitment towards reconciliation. It may also serve to explore potential solutions to constraints or barriers to reconciliation. And lastly, to develop a reconciliation action or implementation plan. These are commonly developed by local governments and Indigenous communities in Australia, and they're increasingly on the radar as a useful tool to support reconciliation by local governments in BC and Canada. They can be developed by or with the participation of the Reconciliation Working Group or Advisory Committee, enabling the direct involvement of Indigenous community and group representatives in the planning process. And in doing so, the development of a plan like this enables a collaborative approach to reconciliation that can also serve to strengthen the relationship. We propose that the assessment report, the forthcoming assessment report, can be served as a starting point to a plan of this nature, and the potential actions and strategies identified in the assessment report can be validated, refined, and or built on based on the needs, values, aspirations, and perspectives of Indigenous communities and groups. And so, these are the, foundational recommendations that we are putting forward, but we just want to clarify that in the forthcoming assessment report, we will contain recommendations for potential strategies and actions that are specific to each of those three action areas identified in the framework. It was just too much to put forward today. We have a high-level table of contents just to have an understanding of what will be included in the assessment report. We'll be framing it with the legislative and policy framework for reconciliation and some of the principles and challenges with reconciliation and relationship building. We'll provide an overview of the CBRD's efforts to date. A big piece of our background research and review, as mentioned previously, was looking at what other local governments have been doing that might lend support to the CBRD's efforts. And just for some context on some of the the jurisdictional scan, how the breadth of it. So we've been looking at communities both in BC, other parts of Canada, and abroad, namely in Australia. And we're pulling up planning considerations that have informed the recommendations. We also speak to the inputs that we have received from the CBRD focus group and will be receiving from the CBRD survey. Those will also be informing the recommendations, and the report will conclude with those recommendations for potential mid and long-term strategies. And we'll end there, and just wanted to put it forward to see if anybody had any questions, comments, or suggestions.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up Are there any questions? Director Hillian?
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks for the presentation. The thing that brings me the most joy is not exactly a revelation, but the fact that our staff are engaged authentically in this and that their awareness is high. I'm very appreciative of that. But I just wonder, I don't believe we were provided with any background on the choice of your firm as the consultant for this project. And I note from your internet information that you have a fairly extensive background in this field. And I just wondered if you wanted to highlight that for both the board and anybody who might be tuning in. Thanks.
Absolutely, and thank you for that opportunity. So the Dillon team has had the pleasure of working with Indigenous communities for quite a period of time. And we're really fortunate that we've worked with, I think, over 100 Indigenous communities across the country in various capacities, from land use planning, environmental planning, supporting communities and documenting Indigenous knowledge to inform decision-making processes and regulatory processes. Even things like infrastructure, engineering. My line of work is primarily in the planning, capacity building, and I guess striving to integrate Indigenous knowledge into decision-making processes with environmental assessment. And we also support various public and private organizations, institutions, and governments, and understanding how best to approach relationship building or how to navigate challenges to relationship building. So we are able to, I guess, have a sense of the various sides and perspectives to these important relationships and challenges that they may face.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I also wanted to note in your report, you acknowledge that this process will eventually be more collaborative, but at this point is fairly exclusive to the CVRD. And I think it's been interesting to see through the difficult year we've had with the discoveries and such, a lot of organizations struggling with how to approach Indigenous reconciliation. And in many cases, looking to Indigenous people to basically tell them what to do. And you raised the very important capacity issue and the fact that much of this work is needs to be carried out by settler society. And as such, your report makes really good sense to me. And I was pleased to see this approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Director Cole-Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thank you, Caroline, for the report. I think this lays a really, really strong foundation for the assessment report. And just one thought that I had is I would like to see a more specific inclusion of the Métis community in the report. There is a Métis Association, Mikisew Métis Association of the Comox Valley, and they're not on the stakeholder distribution list. I was thinking it'd probably be good to provide them with a copy of the report. And although I think most definitions of Indigenous include the word Métis, often they've have been an afterthought. And I think it'd be nice to see a specific mention. The word Métis doesn't appear in the report of them, particularly in the assessment report, to give a very full sense of the meaning of Indigenous. Thanks.
Thank you very much. That's an excellent perspective and very much agree with that. We will make sure that is reflected in the report.
Thank you. Director Hamir.
Thanks, Chair. And again, thank you for the report. I'm just wondering if you have a timeline for when the assessment report will be going out to the community.
Well, we'll be providing a draft. I think it's already next week. Time is flying, and we're anticipating the report will be finalized by November 30th, I think is the date we're looking at. I unfortunately cannot speak to the sharing of the report with the community. I can only speak to when we will be providing a final version to the CVRD. I don't know if I can, I apologize, I'm not sure the usual approach here, if I'm able to pass that question on to somebody on the CVRD side who may be able to speak to that, or if that, what the appropriate way to I guess, pass that question on to the appropriate responder would be.
Thanks, Carolyn. Yeah, I can take that. So you're right. I think the end of November is when the assessment report is due from Dylan and from Caroline. And then our intent is to be able to share it with the board, but also consider the actions in there and consider them in our 2022 financial planning discussions and understand what kind of commitments, resources and opportunities are there so that we can then plan for what to do in the new year.
Great, thanks. Well, I really appreciate that comment from staff that you're already considering how to embed the recommendations into financial planning. That's fantastic. If I may have a follow-up question. Carolyn, I'm just wondering, it sounds like you've done quite a breadth of these types of plans across BC and potentially even across the country. I'm wondering if you have any advice of maybe cautions or missteps that have happened in other communities that we could learn from, or things that you've seen that maybe have gone sideways that we could try and avoid.
That's a good question. And I just want to clarify first that I don't know that anybody has a lot of experience yet developing these particular plans, because this is certainly an emerging area. So just to clarify, we have a lot of experience doing various types of planning, but this is an emerging area. In terms of, I guess, things to be on the radar, one of the things we've seen is there's often a mismatch between timelines and expectations for progression between, local governments in this case and Indigenous communities. And I think that is probably one of the most important things that comes to my mind as you ask me that question, is understanding the time that is needed to build those relationships, on trust, to really develop mutual understanding of the respective sides' needs, the reality of constraints, and work together to identify those opportunities. And I've also seen where it can be quite a challenge where when there is a change in leadership on either side, it can sometimes be a challenge to continue charting that path forward in relationship building. And so opportunities to nest, policies that might support that path forward, even with change in leadership, regardless of which side is on, is also something for consideration, because we've seen that happen where it can really set relationships back quite dramatically. I think those would probably be my major ones. I guess the third one that I would add that comes to mind is when it comes to awareness building, there's a general awareness of Indigenous peoples and the histories, but it's really important to understand the local perspective, the perspectives of the local communities. And so when we're talking about training and awareness building, there's different layers and approaches. And I think there's a lot of value in working with the local communities to have them involved in that, so that there is a true depth of understanding of the local context, and that can really support those relationships.
Great, thank you. Director Morin.
Great, thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for this. I'm looking forward to seeing the report. I note in the objectives that the second bullet talks about staff capacity, and of course we know that our leadership team, we have a lot of contact with them and know the great work. I'm really happy to see this staff survey element, because I think it's important that we know that experiences are across the spectrum with individuals in terms of their knowledge and comfort level, and really every single staff person has the potential to connect with someone from the Indigenous community, and those points of contact can be really powerful in positive and negative ways. And I just think having that training, and I also note the ongoing kind of self-directed learning, I think is just really important to have in there because we don't always know, you know, the backstory of people, but if we go in understanding that something could be really complicated or upsetting to somebody because of their historical experience, I think it's important that all staff have that training and knowledge. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's also speaks to, you know, how long it takes to build that relationship and as she was saying about the risk of leadership change. I think that's why it's great to have these foundational documents that we've been working on with our Indigenous partners and the framework, the Indigenous Relations Framework, also the staff handbook, that these will be around for years and can be developed as we go. And also, you know, creating this action plan so that there will be concrete steps of moving forward, no matter who is at the table. So I think that's really positive. So thank you very much, Carolyn. Thanks for doing the important work on our behalf, and thanks for your presentation tonight.
Thank you very much. And thanks everybody for your questions and comments and your time.
Okay, and all in favor of receipt? Anyone opposed? And that's carried. We're moving on to item 4, the Comox Valley Neighborhood Emergency Preparedness Program update. Grant and Grieve, thank you, and I'll pass it to staff.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And George Dirksen, our Deputy Emergency Program Director, is here to provide this presentation and answer any of your questions.
Thank you very much. Is it okay if I take off my mask or? Sorry. Sure. Right. Slide. There we go. Okay. Through the chair to the directors. Good afternoon, everybody. The emergency program has been working over the last year, revising the old NEP program and, oh, I can do it myself. The old NEP program and materials, and I wanted to be here today to show you the new fully completed version of the guidebook, but unfortunately it's taking a little bit longer at the designers than we had anticipated. So we expect that it's going to be completed probably Friday or early next week, but as Friday is my retirement day, it was suggested that I take my 10 minutes in the spotlight and just give you a brief overview of what's happening in the program. So we needed to change the NEP program. The original was created in 1999 through federal funding, and it was used provincially. And as far as we know, that there were never any updates made to that 1999 program, so it's very outdated. And it's not user friendly. It's at about 200 pages. It's a real beast. Excuse me. And it was designed somewhat around the incident command system, which is, if you're familiar with ICS, it's what first responders use. It's what we use within an emergency operations center. But it's not something that you would expect, school teachers or plumbers or bus drivers to be familiar with. So it'd certainly take a lot of training to get familiar with. Looking to the future, ideally, I think what we would all like to see is a number of NEP neighborhoods across the Comox Valley. And the formal structure of the old plan was not going to allow that to happen. Next slide, please. Okay, so in collaboration with a small working group that represented 6 NEP, we call it NEP neighborhoods, NEP teams, and Habitat for Humanity, we looked at what NEP needed to be. We felt it needed to be appealing. And when we say appealing, we mean not only to and we call them neighborhood champion, not only to the neighborhood champion who might pick up a brochure in the lobby and look at it and say to themselves, you know, I think we can do this in our neighborhood, but also to the neighbors themselves who need to be convinced that, you know, that this is something good for their neighborhood, their community. And I believe we've done it by making it easy to start, easy to run, and easy to maintain. Beneficial. I think this is an easy sell, you know, following a major disaster, if you pick up your phone and you don't even hear a dial tone on the other end, I think it'll be really comforting to know that your neighborhood is prepared and you're not alone. Sustainable. That's one of the reasons why I chose this picture here. Too often we've seen individuals who become the driving force behind this and other projects. They're people who are extremely energetic, they're real drivers, good salespeople. They've got a ton of ideas, and they can really get a lot of people behind them. The problem is that when you have a program that's demanding, it's too detailed, it's too time consuming, when that person decides to move on to something else or decides to step down from that position, it's really difficult to find other people to fill that position. And oftentimes those programs can fade away, disappear entirely. We're actually seeing this a little bit right now on Hornby. There's some problems that have been happening. Well, just people that have disappeared from their emergency committee. And fortunately, we still have some people there who are willing to take on leadership roles. I had a Zoom meeting with them recently, and we were discussing this new program, and I can tell you that they're really excited about it. They're looking forward to seeing what we come up with. Reflect the needs and wants of the neighborhood. It can be as simple or as robust as the neighborhood wants. Be non-threatening, and non-threatening I mean in not only the materials but in the language within the materials as well. This was reviewed by we had the Campbell River Literacy Association review the materials just to make sure it wasn't threatening, and instituted some of the changes that they suggested. And supported locally and regionally, locally within the neighborhoods and regionally within all the local governments. And we have received that, all local governments, including Comox First Nation. Next slide, please. Removing barriers. Within the new guidebook, there are, these are the main questions we felt people would want answered. So they were our focus. What is NEP? Provided them with a definition. Neighborhood Emergency Preparedness Program is simply neighbors helping neighbors prepare for a major disaster by creating a more self-reliant community. What are the benefits? Is it difficult? We provide benefits. There's a lot more material in the guidebook. Is it difficult? No, it isn't. So what's the time commitment? Really low if you're just looking at a basic plan. And will it work in my neighborhood? Absolutely. It doesn't matter whether it's a farm community, acreages, trailer court, high rises, it'll work in any of those. Next slide. Okay, the guidebook literally has a step-by-step guide to creating a basic NEP plan, and it has these same steps. Step number one, be personally prepared. We ask that people be personally prepared. How can you ask a neighborhood to be prepared if you're not yourself personally prepared? Step two, become a neighborhood champion. That's the person that steps up and will lead the initial charge. We're not saying that these are the people that after a disaster that they need to lead that charge. They're just the people who are willing to get some of the neighbors together and have a discussion. Step number three, prepare to host a meeting, and we walk through this, a checklist of what they need to do to host that meeting. And step number four, host the meeting and together create a basic NEP plan. And when I say together, I mean that the emergency program will be right there helping them step by step through the whole process. We provide the materials that they need. And hopefully in the hour and a half that we're with them, they'll be able to walk away with a fully completed basic NEP plan. And next slide. Okay, creating a more detailed plan. If they want a more detailed plan, these are the options that are available to them, or what we suggest. here. One of the first things that we tell folks is that you are not trained first responders. And to enforce that, what we want to do is get away from some of the language that was in the old program or in the old manual. So you can see here, we've got the new guidebook and the old manual. And the old one, they talk about disaster response units. They talk about fire suppression. They talk about rapid damage assessment, light urban search and rescue, disaster first aid. These are terms that are often used in relation to first responders, and we don't want people to think they're first responders. We don't want them to get into situations where they're going to endanger themselves. So these are the new headings that we have now that we've created. Next slide. We have 20 appendices in the plan. So you can see there it's 40 of 54. It's actually 55 pages now. So 20 appendices. So the plan itself, if you take away the title page and like table of contents, it's about 12 pages long. There's not a lot of detail that people have to go through. We wanted to keep it brief. We've seen plans that are like that's the initial one that's 200 pages. I've seen other ones that are 150 pages. I've seen ones that are like 6 pages. So I think ours will be really beneficial for people to use. You can see there that some of the appendices that we talk about, we have a sample of a fully completed basic net plan, so people know exactly what they're shooting for. Some of the things I'll point out here, we have a post-disaster checklist. We have food security, urban gardening, and neighborhood, the NET team, and Fire Smart. We're really pushing Fire Smart in conjunction with our NET program. If people are, at risk of fire, we want to team them up with somebody to come out and do a presentation on Fire Smart as well. And the same thing with Fire Smart. When Fire Smart goes out and does a presentation, we want to team up with them, like some of our fire departments team up with them and go out and give a very brief presentation on NET, and hopefully they'll call us and have them come out, or have us come out and do a presentation as well. Next slide. I mentioned about the emergency program being there step by step. So this is what we'll provide in-person or online presentations, free printed and electronic materials, online discussion forum. This is something that we wanted. The online discussion forum and the online interactive map is through CVRD Connect. And it'll be a way for existing NET programs that, it's something that'll be very beneficial for them. It's a way for beginning programs and programs that have been existing for a long time to get together and discuss what their concerns are, problems, solutions, things that will be beneficial. And we already have people that are willing to step forward and make this happen, which is great. I mean, volunteers in other NET communities are looking forward to that. Again, support for Fire Smart and just ongoing support through, emails and phone calls. Next slide. Oh, that's it. And that quote there is actually in the guidebook as well. It's one of the quotes that we have in there. So just to let you know that from here on, what's going to happen is as soon as the materials are all set to go, at some point in time, the emergency program will be back to do a presentation. And at the same time, also give you a presentation on what the ad campaign is going to look like. Before my retirement, it was supposed to be a soft kickoff this fall or this winter, and then the ad campaign early spring. With the new person that'll be coming in to take my position, I'm sure they're going to have to be oriented to what I do, and I'm not sure exactly when Hallie will want them taking this piece on. So it'll happen. Any questions?
Great, thanks so much. Yes, there is a question, Director Hamir.
So thanks, George, for both your presentation and your work with the CVRD and your time in emergency services. Just want to thank you for all of your commitment. I'm really excited to hear about this sort of the reworking of the NET program. I just can't stress how important these neighborhood emergency groups are, I think, both for preparedness and for community building. I notice it's one thing that not every neighborhood, not even in rural areas, not everybody knows everybody. And I think it's one of the ways that we can bring people together and take some stress off of the RD in case we do have an emergency. I mean, it does also show up under the financial responsibility. I think the more that we can prepare neighborhoods to be able to take care of themselves, the less stress it will be on our emergency services. So I'm wondering about how many households do you recommend come together to start a NET? Like, is there a minimum number?
No, I don't think there's a minimum number. These are expandable. So I think even if you get a few neighbors involved, once they start talking to their other neighbors, you know, it can grow and grow.
Fantastic. Do you have any idea how many of these NET programs you could potentially support in a year? I know, like you mentioned, an hour to an hour and a half, but I'm assuming there's ongoing support that kind of happens. So do you have an idea of how many you could get done in a year?
That's a really good question. And I can't say. One of the things that, you know, with the online portion as well, we have to monitor that. And I don't know how much time that'll take. I'm hoping with the forum and that maybe with a Q&A piece on through Connect, CVRD Connect, that it'll answer a lot of questions and allow us to go up and do more presentations, and that the people will be able to answer questions amongst themselves, but we'll see.
Sure. Can I ask one more follow-up?
There are a couple
I will go.
waiting,
I'll
so I'll come back
folks
around.
come.
Dr. Arbor?
Thanks, George. You know, to see this, you know, to go from 150 to 100 pages to 12 in the appendices, I think takes a lot of talent in terms of distilling the critical from what could be important, you know, and also making it in a way that residents across the Comox Valley can feel comfortable in their ability to respond to emergencies, both for themselves and for the neighbors around them. So what a great legacy to leave. And I also want to underline all the great work you've done in my short time here. The COVID response, all those different things, I think you were really great. I heard a lot of great feedback from you and the rest of the emergency team in the communities. Can I ask permission? I assume you're planning to not leave the Comox Valley and stay around Union Bay, but I was thinking of putting that up on the bulletin board in Union Bay if you're agreeable. It is public information, but I thought I'd thank you on there. And I don't know if I'll wait for Friday, but might see it earlier than that. Anyways, thanks so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Dr. Morin?
Great, thank you, Chair. I'm wondering how well, first of all, thank you for all your work, and it must be a little bit bittersweet that you're not going to be here for the big hurrah,
Yes.
but maybe you'll come back. I don't know.
Howie keeps reminding me that he's going to be, I think, be knocking on my door in another couple of months. We'll see.
I'm wondering the 6 teams that are participating, so that they were existing teams from before, and do we have a registry of how many teams we have locally now, or?
That's it. It's the 6 teams.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's so you included the whole 6 teams.
Yes.
I guess I'm wondering if there would be any targeting of sort of maybe some more vulnerable neighborhoods that are in, you know, flood areas or anything like that. That was one question I had. And I also wanted to bring up, I know Director Grieve would remember this, that the Social Planning Committee, when we had the elected officials kind of workshop with them, they thought that these neighborhood groups could be utilized for a lot of different, I guess, purposes. So I thought it might be good to connect with them and see if they can help in any way or collaborate on this. Oh, there's Howie over there nodding, I see. So yeah, I'll let you answer the question about particular neighborhoods that are going to get targeted to bring on board, or you're just leaving it sort of voluntary for people to come forward?
That's a great question, and it's something that I think might have to be identified in the ad campaign. How we would do that. It hasn't been brought up. I haven't had a conversation. It's a good one though.
Okay, thank you.
And I just wanted to clarify, when I talk about 6 NEP teams, 2 of those are Hornby and Denman.
Right.
And they have a different structure. They have like an overseeing committee, and they can have, I don't know, 25, 35 neighborhoods on the islands that, that they're trying to coordinate. So it's a lot more neighborhoods involved than just 6.
Okay, thank you.
So through the chair to Director Moore, yeah, so we are going to target that. We do have a community wildfire protection plan that was done for the region. So we use the medium to high risk communities as will be a target component, as well as our flood management piece that we've done over the since I've been here 5 years, where we know some of our high risk communities. So we will go out there and reach out to those communities as well.
That it's also unfortunate that you're leaving before new staff, because I've been lobbying to get some more resources in your department, because it's been a really overtaxed department. I mean, I know all departments are working hard, but it's too bad that you don't get to see the benefits of perhaps a bit of help. Thanks.
They're working on it.
Director Graves.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess the best thing could happen to a neighborhood emergency preparedness program is you never have to use it. But you know that these things never announce themselves until they absolutely happen. We talked about earthquake shakedown, emergency preparedness exercise, which has never happened. I know it goes way back to 2010. We first talked about it. So I do think, though, that this dovetails very well in the electoral areas with our support of community halls. Now, some of the halls are few and far between, but at least they are a focus point for the community, and would be a good place to maybe at least kick off this program. We talk about wildfires and Fire Smart. And we do have some choke points out there where there's no escape. We talk about Macaulay Road today, actually, and Forbidden Plateau and other areas. So, I welcome this. I'm glad we're moving ahead on it, and we've got a bit of a budget for the promotion and advertisement, which is great. And being that you're actually retiring, I'm sure that the volunteer community would welcome you with open arms. Thank you.
You're the first person that mentioned that. No.
Dr. Muir, do you have a follow-up?
Well, I think Director Morin kind of alluded to it, but I'm just wondering I don't know if this is a George or a Howie question, if you have an idea of a targets for NEPs for 2022, like how many ideally some new ones would you like to see on board?
Do you want to answer that?
Through the chair to the director. Yeah, so because it's going to be a new, fresh program and we don't know how much time commitments communities will do, we're we'll move through that process. But I think, doing part of the community campaign, as well as George had said, looking at our HRVA, or hazard risk and vulnerability, is kind of where we're going to go, and working with the fire chiefs in those communities to actually try to draw what they see as interest, because they're very in touch with their communities and what their concerns are. So.
Okay, thank you. So in light of your retirement, George, hope you don't mind, we'd like to say a few words about you. George Dorkson started with the CBRD in 2012, backfilling a term bylaw compliance officer position. In late 2013, he worked as a contractor supporting business continuity and emergency planning. In May 2017, he became full-time staff of the CBRD as Deputy Emergency Program Coordinator, supporting the Comox Valley Emergency Program. He has continued to the success of the emergency program, becoming a core service of the CBRD. He has contributed to the success of the emergency program, becoming a core CBRD service. Some of the key contributors he provided were revisions of the CBRD business continuity plan, creation of evacuation guidelines for Denman and Hornby Islands, supporting emergency support services, volunteers and calls, and Comox Valley Regional Emergency Operations Center, and supporting other local governments during the deployment of that. George shared many skills while with us, such as, but not limited to, being good with collaborating with people, putting pride and great diligence into the products and documents that he has created. We wish George well in his retirement and hope he will stop in from time to time, preferably as an ESS volunteer.
Here we go.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And I just want to thank you or let you know that it's been fantastic working with all of you. You've been really supportive, not just to me, but to the emergency program. And it's, we see it and we appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Yes, we are on receipt. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We are on to item 5, Electoral Area Service Committee, October 4th minutes. Grant and Hamir? All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. And there's a recommendation.
Second.
Grant and Cole Hamilton, thank you. And so that's recommendation 1 around the development variance permit for Henderson and Gordon. It's a vote of the areas. Any further comments, questions? All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. We're on to recommendation 2. Grant and Hamir, thank you. And this is to endorse an agency referral list for external agencies, and it's around Hudson Road. Again, a vote of the areas. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, before the board considers this matter an ALC consideration, and my wife being the chair, I'll just remove myself from the meeting.
Thank you. Grant and McCullum, thank you. And this is about non-adhering residential use. Any further comments, questions? And again, a vote of the areas, all in favor? And that's unanimous. Allow him to come back before we move on to item 4. Lauren and Grant, thank you. And it's around the Union Bay Water Service. Any further discussion? And it's a vote of the full board. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. 5, it's around Mount Washington Fire Protection Service. Any further discussion? And all in favor? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Director Grieve.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would just like to extend my appreciation to the director from Area B for seeing to it that she can contribute $200,000 from Lazo North to this project. It brings it much closer to what we need to carry it forward. The only thing that remains now is we get some electoral assent for our borrowing bylaw to get the wheels moving, and hopefully we'll be able to construct the fire hall, long-awaited fire hall in Mount Washington, in the next building window, which will be 2022. So let's hope. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks for the background. So it is a vote of the full board. All in favor? Anyone opposed? And it's carried unanimously. We're on to item 6. It's the grant, Hillian and Grant, and that's for sewage commission minutes from October 5th. It's a vote of the full board. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. And 7 is the Recreation Commission minutes from October 5th, and it's been moved by Grant and Hamir. Any further discussion? It's a vote of full board. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried unanimously. We're on to item 8. That's Cole Hamilton and Grant. And item 8 is the Committee of the Whole Elected Officials Forum, which took place on October 12th. And it's a vote of the full board. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried unanimously. We're on to item 9. Hillian and Grant, and it's a special sewage commission minutes of October 19th. Vote of the full board. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried unanimously. We are on to item 10, strategic planning findings. Grieve and Grant, thank you, and I will pass it to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors, and James Warren, Deputy CAO, is here to present the report and answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Russell. Thanks, Russell. I think Lisa has a PowerPoint to bring up. So thank you, directors, for the opportunity to present the staff report and findings from your 2021 strategic planning session. Before getting into the outcome from the September session and the recommendation in today's staff report, I wanted to take you back. Following the local government elections in October of 2018, you as the board conducted a number of strategic planning sessions. And while some of the details have changed along the way, including the advancement of your highest priority items, the core principles around public services and service delivery have remained constant. You've embraced the CVRD's core values, being collaboration, service, accountability, and sustainability. And you've applied your own lens to the work that we do. You've defined how it is that your staff undertake their work by committing to the 4 strategic drivers. In fact, it was as far back as your October 2019 workshop where you first solidified those drivers to direct that services are delivered in a manner that promotes community partnerships, builds upon our relationships with Indigenous nations and works towards reconciliation, protects the environment and adapts to the climate crisis, and manages our services in a fiscally responsible way. With that framework, you set your strategic priorities and gave direction as we contended with the COVID 2019 pandemic last year. And as illustrated in the 2021 corporate plan, we continued to apply your drivers and get certain tasks and priorities accomplished. This was all done over the past year through the implementation of Rethink Comox Valley, which included a complete review and a reset of our service levels. In late September of this year, Alison Hadkirk helped to facilitate your most recent session and identify your highest priority actions for this last year in your term of office. With local government elections less than 1 year away, the priorities you've set reflect upon your goals and the community's needs, while still being achievable and making a difference. As you can see from Alison's report, each of the 8 core services lists a range of initiatives for staff to take action on. Additionally, 8 priority projects are identified that cover planning for sustainable growth in targeted development areas, improving recreation services, growing your agricultural opportunities, and protecting the environment, which includes preparing for climate change and community emergencies. Building on the work you've done through the strategic planning session, staff are now able to add details to our work plans and assign resources to take action. And you'll see evidence of this through subsequent staff reports on various topics, but also through the 22 to 26 financial planning process that is set to begin in January. In addition, a news release has been prepared that would report on your strategic planning process and announces your priorities for 2022. Your executive management team is available to assist with any of the items in Allison's report or the staff report. And with that, I turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Great, thanks so much. And we do have some hands up. Director Arbor.
Thanks. A good read. And I just have a couple of comments. One is minor, which is I think we had 3 categories, but they don't always work. The example that struck my mind was on the internet one where it says take a step back. And to me, it's more like complete in the sense we're not peeling away from the initiative or anything like that, but it's a bit like, moving to core services. So I felt their language was not always perfect in those 3 categories. The more substantive one is I don't struggle with that topic. Actually, I love that topic, but struggle with the name of it, which is watershed management. And is the second word, right? The CVRD does not manage the watersheds at all. So I've been toying with watershed conservation, watershed health. It just felt like management makes it seem like we currently have a lot of control over what happens and we don't. So that'd be my more substantive comment in terms of the 8 topics that are highlighted. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Hamir.
Thanks. And thanks to Beth for this summary. Sometimes those strategic planning sessions kind of come off in a blur after a couple of days. And so it's always nice to come back to it. And especially with highlighting the initiatives that we want moving forward for the next year. I was looking at the list and I see, it's very heavy weighted on our planning staff. And I'm just wondering if staff have given any initial consideration of what extra resources that planning may be requiring to implement so many of these different strategies.
Sure, I can take a stab and then Russell might want to jump in too. Yeah, staff undertake a review of personnel and understand resources on an annual basis, and it's usually over the summertime that we dig into what those numbers look like in anticipation of the financial planning process that you'll see beginning in January. And then the strategic planning work that we've just done will help inform that and solidify those recommendations that we'll be coming forward with. I'm sure if Russell wanted to add anything.
Yeah, a good sign is Alana hasn't passed out under the table. But I think that we have, through the consideration of our work plan for next year and your commitments, really been frugal and really been mindful of ensuring that we can deliver on what is provided here. There may be a few little modifications in terms of the staff requirements that we have, but that will all be vetted through the work plan process. What we have proposed definitely is manageable and is not too extreme in terms of potential costs to the taxpayer. We're always mindful of that.
Great, thank you. We may have a follow-up. A second question, sorry. And, I'm going to ask because, of the timeliness and just, it is one of my big projects I want to see happening is the agricultural planning. Do we have any updates to what is happening either for the ag plan or the coordinator position?
Yes, we'll be coming forward to the EA directors to provide an update, and we'll keep you informed and the rest of the board as well through the board and the minutes coming forward.
Hey, thank you. Don't see any further questions. So James, you get off lightly.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, is by consensus, is it fair that the language around watershed management be changed to a term such as stewardship or something reflecting the fact that we don't own and have full control over the land, that we ask Allison to modify the report accordingly? Or would you like to resolve something to that end?
Okay, so we're still on receipt, so we could move receipt, and all in favor? Oh. Well, I haven't called it, so go ahead.
Sorry, I thought there was anyway. At the risk of bringing up the airshed, whatever. I'm just looking at it here. So the spring 2022, is that date, is that timeline the most easily achievable? I guess I'm just wondering if there's any possibility of the action plan coming sooner than spring 2022, just because then there's the implementation to see if there's anything that can be implemented. Because if the action plan doesn't come out until the spring, then implementation would come a lot later. It would just be great to see some things come out of that.
Madam Chair, my
Earlier.
advice on that one, and again, we have really put our minds to what is realistic in terms of these timeframes, but that in particular is one where we have outside agencies and groups associated with the work that needs to be done to get there. It's not merely just staff that I can reallocate to them in honor and respect of those that are participated to date in the process, and we'll provide the input to the action plan. I think it would be hard for us to move that any
Right.
faster.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. So all in favor of receipt? Anyone opposed? That's carried unanimously. And so in the recommendation, maybe whoever moves it forward, they can add that with modified wording around watershed management. I'll ask if there's further discussion. Has it been seconded? Grant and Hamir, thank you. Director Arbor.
Yeah, just Allison may struggle, but how does the board feel about just advocacy, watershed advocacy? Because that's primarily what we'll be doing, both with the province, with our partners, with the people who actually do manage the watersheds. We'll be advocating for, a slightly different lens. Is the board interested in using that word, or just kicking it to just a general, Director Grant's suggestion?
There is a level of monitoring though that takes place, so I'm not sure if that's inclusive of that.
Madam Chair, I suggested stewardship because if you look at action number 5 in the report, watershed management, work towards water stewardship across jurisdictions is what the action will be. So stewardship is used throughout the actual things that we will be doing under this direction.
Thank you, Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair. I think the use of the word advocacy is a good one, and it fits behind any other number of modifiers or adjectives. Watershed sustainability advocacy, watershed stewardship advocacy. Yeah, so that I would support that, but it's not a big deal for me.
Okay, any more further comments? We will go with what's on the screen. To vote the full board, all in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. And we are on to procedure bylaw updates for electronic meetings. Grant and Cole Hamilton, thank you. And I will pass it over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And Jake Martins is here, General Manager of Corporate Services, to describe the report and recommendations and answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Russell, and through the chair. So in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, a variety of provincial regulations and orders were brought forward to limit and in some cases restrict public attendance at local government meetings. And such measures led to the CVRD as well as local governments across the province implementing virtual meeting formats in order to continue to conduct business and manage the services that they provide. In recognition of the value of these formats, the province has implemented new legislative provisions that enable local governments to continue to meet in sort of that virtual format for both regular and special meetings. And so as the Local Government Act requires that those provisions be outlined in the procedure bylaw, this is really the first step in notifying the board of a proposed amendment to the procedure bylaw to enable such provisions within our own procedure bylaw. So at today's meeting, you'll notice there is no formal bylaw readings proposed. So this is just notification in that regard, with the actual bylaw amendment being coming forward in November. And with that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you. Director Arbor.
Thanks. I have a request as you contemplate that work in that you take a huge step back and really think about a range of scenarios. I know this was triggered by COVID, but I think myself and most of my residents are really growing tired of the constant change of policies every 3 weeks by the province around COVID. And early summer, we moved from having a planned stage 1, 2, 3, 4 that would see us dance in September. Then we kind of tossed that plan, moved to something else. And then even just last week, there was some substantive changes to advance businesses, and people want some consistency, because I don't think we'll sustain like that for the next 2 years. So as we consider our own procedural bylaws for electronic meetings, I'm just hoping that this doesn't have to be changed in 6 months, so that we build something that is really looking at the next decade. That's something that is good under a number of scenarios and is not just a response to the somewhat temporary policies that the province keeps coming up with in regards to COVID. Thank you.
Thank you through the chair. Yeah, I appreciate that feedback. And certainly that's our intention, is to bring forward broad provisions for electronic meetings and participation without too many restrictions or qualifications on that. Anticipating that, we'd like these provisions to last for the long haul and be able to serve the board well, regardless of whether it's a pandemic or other issue that may arise in the future. You will note in the proposal that comes forward that it will enable electronic meetings and participation, but not provide restrictions on the number of members that may be permitted to participate through those formats. And that, again, is just intending to give us the widest opportunities and options going forward.
Great, thank you. Director Grieve.
Yes, through the chair and the CAO to staff. I don't think there's any going back on this. I think we've passed the threshold. I think the hybrid meetings are going to be the way of the future. Take a look at the regional districts in the interior, where people have to travel for a whole day to come to a meeting. I mean, it's ludicrous. So as far as our little Fisher Price bylaws go, I mean, we are basically at the whim of senior government on this stuff. So I mean, it's all very well and fine to huff and puff and posture, but really, I mean, if Dr. Bonnie comes up with something next week, we're going to have to comply. So I mean, with just like you say, make it as broad as possible. And I really don't think that I think the world has changed. I really don't see us going back. So I was going to bring something else up, but I think we'd better let it go today.
Director Hamir.
Thanks. From the report, Jake's report, I did hear the term enabling legislation, enabling bylaw. And I just want to point out that, one of the benefits we've seen with these hybrid meetings where not everyone can be in participation, besides COVID, for directors who have young children or who are themselves not feeling well or have family who are sick, it really does enable them to participate without having to be here in person. And I would say the same for, the community, having delegations come electronically. So my understanding is that, this change in bylaw actually will enable this to continue happening beyond any kind of lifting of COVID regulations, whatever, and really kind of sets up sort of more permanent aspect to the ability for both directors, staff, and for the public to participate electronically.
Great, thank you. All right. Director Arbor.
unanticipated consequences. So, will there be provision for looking at, say that somebody gets elected and spends the next 4 years taking meetings from Bermuda? And to Ganesh, apparently Dr. Grant's actively planning his retirement. But unanticipated consequences, is there going to be thought given to that, or basically future directors could attend all meetings electronically should they choose to do so?
Thank you, and through the chair. Yeah, that's one of the considerations that certainly the ministry encourages local governments to consider about how many meetings in a row a director or a council member could attend. Again, our intention is to not place such restrictions around it, but that wouldn't prevent the board from implementing such restrictions or guidelines in the future. As Director Grieve mentioned, certainly with great distances being traveled, and in particular our Comox Strathcona Waste Management Board, we see great value in enabling continued electronic participation. But yeah, I respect that there may be some negative aspects or instances that arise in the future, and it would be for the board at that time to consider any adjustments.
Great, thanks, Jake. All right, I don't see, oh, yeah, I do. Director Morin.
Yeah, I think I see your point. I think that those individual kind of circumstances may come up from time to time, but I don't think that should impact our decision, because we know with an election coming up next year, and many of us hope that we can, not that we want to be gone, but that we do have fewer barriers for people to get into public office. And we know that you can physically be in the room and not necessarily be engaged. So I don't think that participating online is necessarily reflecting the quality of your participation.
Thanks for that input. Okay, now I don't see any further hands, so I'll call receipt. All in favor? Anyone opposed?
Second.
That was carried unanimously, and the recommendation has been moved by Grant and Cole Hamilton. Any further discussion? And this is to amend the procedures bylaw for first, second, third readings. Oh, right, there was a small amendment to, okay, thanks, Director Grant. Amendment to that recommendation, not the November 9th meeting, because that is going to be a committee of the whole, but November 23rd meeting. So if everyone's okay with that little tweak. Okay, it's a vote of full board. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. We're on to bylaws and resolutions, and we have already done item 1 with Director Lee. Now we're on to item 2, bylaw number 679. That's the bylaw adjudication ticketing bylaw. Hamir and Hillian, thank you. And this is for adoption, and it's a vote of the areas. All in favor? That's carried unanimously. And we're on to item 3, which is
680 for adoption.
bylaw 680, moved by Grieve, seconded by Hillian. That's the Murrayville Fire Hall temporary barring bylaw for adoption. It's a vote of the full board. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried unanimously. And no new business. And so we will move